It is another edition of the On the Mic podcast, and kind of a special one because it's not like a UFC pay-per-view fight week. It's not a coach or a fighter. It's actually someone I have a lot of respect for in the fight business. And we are talking not one, but two Bellator events. We are talking a UFC event, and we're talking probably one of the biggest boxing fights in the last few years. To join me to break it all down, Jason Hagholm. Jason, how are you?
I am doing very well, Mike. Pleasure to have me on your show. And yeah, it's a crazy busy fight week, as the fight weeks have really been the past few weeks, but should be lots of exciting action throughout this weekend in the realm of combat sports.
Well, since it is your first time on the show, give you an opportunity to tell, the viewers just kind of who you work for, how you got into this, and, how we ended up here.
Well, I've been, a fan of MMA for a long time, since really the beginning of the sport, but really got into it hardcore, 2005 Ultimate Fighter times and stuff like that. But I've been covering the sport for the last few years or so, mostly focusing on the Canadian base. I am based in Canada, in Kitchener, Ontario, just outside of Toronto. And I also do play-by-play for BTC Fight Promotions, which is the top mixed martial arts promotion in the province of Ontario, with now 20 events under our belt, which our BTC 20 is coming up June the 17th in Burlington, Ontario. So yeah, longtime fan, longtime reporter, broadcaster. So I've got a full plate in this sport.
Yes, you do, and that's why I'm happy to have you. Let's just jump right into it. Bellator is in Hawaii for a 2-event weekend, back-to-back nights starting tomorrow, Friday, April 21st. And it's a rematch. And Jason, part of the reason why I wanted to have you on and not a coach or a fighter or anything like that is because I wanted to make one thing clear. Because I don't know the public perception, but sometimes, I'm like that. I'm that guy that overthinks everything. So Deanna Bennett, Liz Carmouche, I think everyone and anyone who follows me and my podcast knows that Deanna Bennett has been on this show countless of times. She was calling for a fight in December. Then we talked on this show after, the fight was announced. But that doesn't mean I'm immediately going to sit here and talk to you and tell you Deanna Bennett's winning the title. I'm not that guy. Now, I am a guy who's going to root for both fighters all the time to do very well. But I think, Jason, if you can speak to this, sometimes in this sport, now when you're on a broadcast, it's a little different. But I would say even the likes of Joe Rogan have said, it's hard to call my friends' fights. I'm not calling fights. I can talk about my quote unquote friends or repeat, guests subjectively. However, it still comes with a fine line of, hey, we're going to break down this fight, but I do feel this certain kind of way.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, you're talking there with Deanna Bennett. You'd have had her on her show. I used to co-host a show with Josh Hill, who's a bantamweight in the Bellator bantamweight division. And it's one of those things where it's I can be bipartial for every fight, but when he fights, it's kind of I have a rooting interest for him because you know him, you speak with him every week and things of that nature. But this fight as well here, Deanna Bennett, Liz Carmouche, as you said, rematch that will be taking place here in Hawaii. They met back in 2020, Bellator 246. Liz Carmouche came away with the rear naked choke victory. And, how about Liz Carmouche? Kind of a career renaissance for her since going to Bellator, undefeated in the promotion, the current champion at the flyweight division, and really put the naysays away when she won the title in controversial fashion, and then was able to get a second round armbar submission over Juliana Velasquez in the rematch at Bellator 289. So another rematch for Deanna Bennett. But I'm excited for this fight. I think this should be a lot of solid action, and we'll see what Deanna Bennett could bring. Because Liz Carmouche, she's been in countless big fights. There's nothing really gonna surprise her what Deanna Bennett brings, but as well, what difference does she bring from a fight that happened almost 3 years ago? I think that's the interesting part of this fight, with it being a rematch.
Plus, Deanna Bennett has changed camps. She's now in Philly with Marquez MMA. She has a great wrestling base. A lot of the previews I've read up on this is that, her best chance is to keep it on the feet. She doesn't want to go to the ground with Liz Carmouche. But, there's something to be said about Deanna Bennett, who's never lost a rematch. Like, you know what I mean? Has never lost a rematch. And Jason, I don't know about you, and it's not just them talking to me, but sometimes in this sport, a fighter just talks and you just believe it. You just believe everything they're saying because they're not selling themselves short to you. So there's no way come fight night they could sell themselves short inside the cage. That's my opinion, looking at it from an outsider perspective. Now, the other part of that is I don't know if Deanna wants to go to the ground with Liz Carmouche. I think that's where Liz Carmouche does have the advantage. But if it's wrestling and Deanna's imploring control time and takedowns, I think that's good for her, but she's got to do something with it. And I don't truly expect Deanna to go in there and get a finish. I think if she does win, it would be by decision. Then we talk about gas tanks, right? She mentioned at the media day yesterday that her coaches read her the scorecards from the first fight against Liz Carmouche. And if you remember, and if anybody listening remembers, in that fight, she tore her hamstring completely off in that fight. And she makes it known that Liz didn't do it. Deanna did it herself. So, but she said, I didn't want my coaches to tell me the scorecards because she was up. I mean, just from that perspective, like I've given Liz her respect. I think what she did, you said it perfectly, right? She kind of silenced the doubters on winning the title. But then for Deanna, if you look at it from that side, it's, hey, this was a very competitive fight between us the first time. Now I've changed my camps. I'm 100% healthy. I mean, this fight will get slept on going into this weekend, but I really don't think it should.
I don't either. I think the style that Deanna brings, and plus, the opportunity, it's one thing to say and call for a title fight, then you get it. Now you gotta, talk the talk and walk the walk, per se here. And, you're talking about gas tanks. When you look at the majority of Deanna Bennett's victories, 9 of her 13 wins have come by decision. So she knows how to take a fight the distance, though. Title fight is a little bit of a different animal where Liz Carmouche has been in them plenty of times throughout her career. So she's got the advantage there, the experience advantage, and, the mental advantage, I would think. But I think, Deanna talking herself up. We just saw it a few weeks ago with Israel Adesanya when he was talking to the media. It wasn't like he was in that laser focus zone. You could really tell that he wasn't, just doing it for show. Like, he truly believed it, and that we're going to see a different Israel Adesanya when he fought Pereira back in the rematch and for the middleweight title. And that's exactly what happened. It was a different result. Deanna's going to have to definitely push the pace, try to keep it for sure on the feet. I don't think you want to go on the ground and mess with Liz Carmouche with her grappling. Deanna's already felt the wrath of that before. But, with these 2 Bellator cards, it's always tough, the first one. But this is a good title fight for a division in Bellator that is really starting to grow and blossom.
Absolutely it is. And plus, you've got that hidden storyline that she was sorry, I was going to call there. You have that hidden storyline that Deanna was asked about in Hawaii, which was, hey, so Lena Lay McFarland said she might make one more run at the title if she wins this weekend. And, either you or Liz could be her retirement fight. And for and listen, I'm not here to tell Deanna's story. Anybody can read it, listen to it, watch it. She could tell it herself the best, obviously. But talking about a woman who kept her father near and dear to her career and her heart, lost him, changed camps, really had several life-changing moments since everything, since joining Bellator. And now here she is. And the thing I wanted you to touch on as well, because if I speak on it, it's going to sound like I'm just talking about somebody I frequently speak to. There's this thing, you mentioned a great point in Israel Adesanya, but he is at such a stardom level that when he talks, 98% of the people are listening and believing. Deanna, as she put it, is quirky, kind of a weirdo, if you will. and out there. And I think, for me, not being fucking friendly or anything, this is, by the way, we can swear on this, so feel free. But not being friendly or anything, just feeling as if it was fighter A, and I just knew how that fighter was as a person. The fact that she hasn't changed into like this serious tone, and she's laser focused, like none of her mannerisms have changed. And to me, that's a good sign coming into this.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely, showing her personality, which is, as you said, I think quirky's the right word. She's got a bubbly personality, but there's definitely going to have to be a lion behind that, and to try to find a way to roar and pounce on Liz Carmouche and take advantage of this opportunity. And if she wins, like, what a breakthrough moment for her in her career. This is a woman that's fought, she's in Bellator. She had a winning record in Invicta, one fight in the UFC. I mean, she's been around as well and fought some of the best fighters in the world at this weight class. And this would be her big breakout moment for her. And I expect to see the best version of Deanna come, I guess this would be Friday night? Yeah, Friday night in Hawaii. And as well, I mean, Liz has as well some home court advantage in the sense of she won a title here in Hawaii last year. Now she's going to try to get a second title defense out on the island of Hawaii. So I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting fight. We'll see what comes of it. What improvements Deanna makes versus the first fight versus Liz is what I think I and a lot of people are interested to see what happens.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot, and this all credit to Liz Carmouche, right? Everything we just talked about. I mean, she is a hell of a fighter. Actually, I'm going to be honest with you, because we're recording this about 1:50 currently Eastern time. I know weigh-ins are right around the corner in Hawaii. That's the first victory for Deanna. She has had issues. And especially, I think she did miss weight against Liz in the first fight. So that's the first victory. And then how is the, approach at the weigh-ins? Does she look sucked out and drained out and all of that? So that's the first one. Liz Carmouche is a pro's pro. And, that's where if I just take out, if I'm just talking Liz Carmouche, the odds are in her favor, literally and figuratively. I do think she is the no doubt favorite in this fight, but just how much of a wrench could she throw in this division? We'll talk about that when we talk about Bellator 295, she being Deanna Bennett. But I want to look at the co-main and then two other fights on this card. Co-main, Tim Johnson, Said Salma. Man, I'm just going to come out and say it. Bellator needs heavyweights to start, and excuse my language, fucking producing. Like, seriously need to start producing, because you look at Ryan Bader, Linton Vassell, Valentin Moldavsky, Steve Mowry, Daniel James has come in and just lit the place on fire. But I have known Daniel James since before he was in Bellator. I've probably known him for the past 7 years of my life. He's already number 4. So, I mean, what are we doing here in this heavyweight division? We got, Tim Johnson, Said Salma. Tim Johnson's putting his ranking on the line. We'll see another heavyweight fight this weekend that we'll talk about. But, man, I mean, what can we expect in this fight? And does this fight even really deserve the co-main slot?
Well, I think when you look at this card and just the depth on it, there isn't that much depth. There are some names and some interesting pieces on this card, like Danny Sabatello, first fight back since losing to Rafion Stotts. I mean, I'm excited to see Kenny Cross make his Bellator debut. But when you look, I think this does deserve the co-main event. And I think this fight should be, hopefully, an action-packed heavyweight fight where, it's just rock'em sock'em robot style, because this is a must-win fight for not only Tim Johnson, but for Said Salma. I mean, Tim Johnson, he's coming off losing 3 fights in a row, 2 by finish to both Fedor and Linton Vassell. And Salma is coming off, 2 losses in a row, 2 split decisions, and 2 not really entertaining fights, if memory serves me right. So, I mean, Salma's a guy that came into Bellator with a lot of hype from, his history fighting on the regional scene with Titan FC, was a champion there. And Tim Johnson, he's just been around the block. He's got some big wins under his belt in this promotion, but this is a someone has to find a way to win to really not only just, I think, keep producing and stay along this roster, but find a way to move up the rankings at heavyweight, because this is a big opportunity for John and big opportunity for Syed Sama as well to, I would say, get the biggest win of his career here against Tim Johnson. So I hope these guys can push the pace, though. I know Sama's probably going to try to put Johnson up against the fence, stay out of those dangerous spots, but this fight needs to produce for both fighters and for the division.
Yeah, and you broke that fight down perfectly. I really don't have too much to say because I'm going to be honest with you. I'm very aggravated with this heavyweight division, right? And it's not at one person or anything, but I just look at a guy like Daniel James. Like I said, he comes in at Bellator 288 last November, gets the upset win over Tyrell Fortune, goes in and beats Marcelo Golm in the third round. And now we're looking at a guy who's calling for a title shot and doing so with Ryan Bader in attendance, and Ryan Bader is agreeing to it. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen. Daniel James is booked for Bellator 297 in Chicago against Gokhan Sarakham. However, my question to you is, where does Ryan Bader go? Because I think the answer is obvious, right? It is Litton Vassell. They have to run that back. I spoke to Litton before the last fight. He went and did what he said he was going to do. He went and showed out. But at number 3 in the heavyweight division is a guy that, like, can he stop getting bad luck? Steve Mowry, tall Steve Mowry. And that's the craziest thing to me, because you have Daniel James, you have Litton Vassell, you have Moldavsky, you have these guys. They're all fighting each other. And Ryan Bader's just sitting there like, let me know when you guys are ready. No, like, let's get Vassell in there, and then let's get Moldavsky and Mowry, or let's get, that has to be a fight that makes sense, is Moldavsky and Mowry. I just don't understand. And maybe because we're going to talk about heavyweights in the UFC this weekend, but can we figure out the heavyweight division in MMA? Because I can't do it.
No, it's heavyweight. It's just a weird division, right? You're going to get, guys that look like world beaters, and then you're going to get some of those, snoozer fights. And yeah, poor Steve Mowry. What a guy. He's a perfect guy to mention here, who had some bad luck when he was looking like really the next face of the Bellator heavyweight division and a homegrown heavyweight for Bellator, where he's coming off, the no contest and then a draw against Ali Isaev back in February. So that's tough. But yeah, this division is just kind of in a weird spot where hopefully it is Litton Vassell. Vassell's coming off a massive win and has to be against Bader for the title, hopefully. And then we'll see where this division plays out. As you mentioned, Daniel James, he's a guy that continues to move up the ranks and, put a good exclamation point in that win against Marcelo Golm a few weeks ago after a fight that really wasn't going anywhere. But then Daniel James showed that power and that experience that he has. And I think for Daniel James, it's that next fight for him where he's fighting here in his hometown of Chicago at Bellator 297. That's the real big fight for him against Gokhan Sarakham coming up. So, yeah, this division's kind of in a weird spot right now where Bader clearly does look as the champion to be a step above, but they have to hopefully make an announcement for when Bader's going to fight soon.
And if you're Bellator in a way, and even if you're Ryan Bader, right, you have to love this. Because the top 4, 5, 6 guys, they're all fighting each other, and they're all just proving their worth along the way, right? So even though Litton Vassell, has had some setbacks, and Steve Mowry has had some setbacks, like you can't take away from them as they're figuring it out along the way. And that's one thing I do love. But you make another great point, is that if Daniel James goes in and gets another finish in June, I mean, if you're talking about a guy with 3 straight finishes in a heavyweight division, and he can sell out a show because he's got crazy knockout power, I mean, it would be hard to deny him a title fight if he gets it done in a spectacular fashion like his last 2. Also on the main card at Bellator 294, Friday, April 21st, you got Sarah McMahon making her promotional debut against Arlene Blanco. As much as we just kind of talked about the Bellator heavyweight division, the Bellator women's featherweight division, not only does it need competitors, it needs a damn champion. It needs Chris Cyborg to show up. how momentum, how much momentum does the winner of this fight get for a potential title fight?
I think if you're Sarah McMahon, you get a win here, you definitely get momentum and probably get that title shot next, because you've got the name value per se from your time in the UFC. You've fought for titles before, and no disrespect to Arlene Blencow, but she fought Chris Cyborg and got kind of throttled for multiple rounds. She fought her twice, I should say, got finished, and then showed a lot of toughness to push forward, but really got outclassed back last year in Hawaii at Bellator 279. So I don't think there's really much room here for Blencow to get a third opportunity. I think it's got to be, if McMahon gets the win, she probably gets the next title shot. I mean, when you just look at this division, it's Kat Zingano. That's a fight that I know Bellator has been trying to make forever with Chris Cyborg, but it just hasn't happened. And then Chris Cyborg's kind of just beaten everyone else in the division, or they've had setbacks like a Pam Sorensen. So if coming here into Bellator this weekend, if Sarah McMahon can get the victory, she's probably getting that title shot. It's either her or Kat Zingano, the two ex-UFC fighters.
And I mean, again, that kind of speaks to what I'm saying, right? The lack of depth in this division. But so here's the other question then. If, let's say, Sarah McMahon gets it done, and no one knows, because Sarah kind of talked about it at Media Day yesterday. No one knows. Let's say this fight is in April. Let's say July comes around, August comes around, and there's no word on Cyborg. Would it not make sense to just vacate the title and then Kat and Sarah for the vacant featherweight championship?
I think logically, yes, but sometimes normal logic just doesn't work in MMA, where you kind of just want to keep Chris Cyborg as the face of that division and a champion in your promotion, where Bellator's having a lot of success this year, but they need the name still of a Chris Cyborg, I think, to be represented as a champion in this promotion. And really one of the faces of Bellator right now. I know Bellator is really doing a good job of pushing some homegrown talent, and they've done a great job of that over the last few years, really since the pandemic. But I think you have to keep Chris as the champion and find a way to get her back in the Bellator cage, because this division without Chris Cyborg, they have some names, but there's just not much buzz for even the hardcore fans, and definitely for the casuals that Bellator's trying to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, that's not me kind of shitting on Chris Cyborg. I actually think I agree with you that it would almost be a bad look for them, right? Like if they vacated or stripped Chris Cyborg. We know if it was the UFC, Dana White would have stripped her twice, did a whole press conference about it, put up a billboard, and then been like, we're done with the Cyborg business. But Scott Coker and Chris Cyborg have such a long, good relationship that it's like, man, I don't want to ruffle Chris's feathers. I'm sure neither side wants to ruffle feathers. So I get what you're saying, and it's a great call out by you. But man, especially you got like a Sinead Kavanaugh, like there's contenders there, but there also needs to be more competitors there. I'm definitely interested in what this fight could do. I wouldn't call this fight a title eliminator, but I definitely agree it could have some big implications if Sarah McMahon wins. Now, where I'm from here in Arlington Heights, Illinois, is a man well known, but now makes his home in Florida. That is Danny Sabatello taking on Marcus Breno. You mentioned Danny earlier. The easiest question is, this is good for Danny, right? Because it's a game opponent. It's someone with a very similar record to him, someone who's not just going to be a cakewalk. He came up short against Rafion Stotts. We know that, but there's no better way to get right back into it than to face someone of equal talent. And I think that is what Danny will face here on Friday night.
I love this fight because, one, it's the first fight for Danny Sabatello under his new Bellator contract. Bellator loves Danny Sabatello. Like, the personality is what he needed a platform in Bellator, and Bellator needed a fighter like him to, talk the trash and how he talks the trash, be very compelling in interviews. I spoke to him last year when the Grand Prix started. one of the best people you can ever talk to. It's just, I think people just want to see a little bit more action from him. Like, I really think he's going to find ways to get Marcus Breno to the ground, control the fight, but we just want to see some more damage. Like, he could have probably should have beaten Rafion Stotts in their fight last year. It's just he treated it like it was an NCAA wrestling match instead of an MMA fight where you got to land some punches, some elbows, some ground and pound, something. And that really cost him because Stotts did enough off his back or in some positions on top to land those ground and pounds and come away with the victory here. But I'm excited for Danny Sabatello in this division. He adds a lot of intrigue. He's the personality, and Bellator seems to fall in love with him, and he's fallen in love with Bellator to an extent. And I think it's a win-win. Now, Marcos Breno, on the other hand, 2 fights for him against some real tough competition, took on Josh Hill, had a great performance against Josh Hill, broke my good friend Josh's nose in that fight. And, Josh doesn't normally take a lot of damage to the face. He's very good at being elusive, trying to implement his game plan. And Breno can take a shot. Josh landed like a spinning back elbow that would have put anyone's lights out, but Breno ate it and pushed forward and came away with the decision. So it'll be interesting to see if Breno can stuff the takedowns and if he can implement his striking against Sabatello, because we know Danny's world is using that high level wrestling and just controlling the fight that way.
But also, he's not like a slouch, right? Like, he's training at American Top Team.
100%.
And so for me as a fan, not just because we have mutual friends and I like him as a fighter and I like his personality, and because he's not Colby Covington, he's just Danny effing Sabatello. Like, I want someone, and it's going to sound weird, and I don't want to feel like I'm challenging all of these fighters, but I am in a sense, because I want to see Danny Sabatello throw hands. I want to see a dangerous Danny Sabatello. We know your wrestling credentials. Jason, I feel like we're going to talk about this in the main event of UFC this weekend. We know your credentials, but sometimes a fight's going to get brought to you, and I don't need to tell you this because you're one of my favorite people in this sport. A different fight could be brought to a fighter, and it's either adjust or get adjusted. And that's it. You know what I mean? So for me, I want to see that, because what would have happened, like you said, if we saw a dangerous Danny Sabatello who didn't give a shit, that just threw everything, the kitchen sink at Rafion Stotts? I think we see a different fight. So I'm fired up. I'm finally fired up talking about this event.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is like, if Breno stuffs a couple takedowns and Sabatello has to kind of rely on the striking, which we haven't seen too much of him really implement, obviously in his time in Bellator, but even throughout his MMA career, like, he hasn't had a finish via TKO or anything of that nature since like 2019, back when he was fighting in Titan FC. He just knows how to use his wrestling, implement the game plan. But if the fight has to change, Sabatello's got some of the best people in his corner, especially Mike Brown. They are wizards in terms of coaching. They've competed at the highest level. Obviously, Mike Brown, former WEC featherweight champion back in the day. I think that's going to be interesting. How does he change the game plan if it's not going his way? Because really, for the majority of his fights in Bellator, he's had everything go his way. He's really faced no adversity. Breno, I think, can push that if he stuffs a couple takedowns and gets to implement his striking, but that's still a wait and see thing. But I'm excited for this fight, because I think this division, not only is it the best division to me in MMA, it may be the best division in this promotion right now with the talent that's going on. We're going to conclude the Grand Prix, and we'll talk about that. But there's just so much depth at 135 pounds in Bellator and in MMA.
I was going to say, in MMA, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, yeah, I know the bigger weights sell better, right? All that. But man, if you're not getting up for bantamweights and featherweights, like, over the next few months, and if you haven't been for the past year and a half, 2 years, crazy deep, crazy talented. Danny Sabatello, a part of that huge level of talent at 135 pounds. Just to mention a couple of names. We don't have to break down the fights, but Michael Lombardo also fighting this weekend. He was just on the podcast. You mentioned Kenneth Cross and Tyrell Fortune and Chris Lencioni. So for a card that only features 9 fights, Bellator 294 is a very fun card. And Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're not broadcasting the fights and because you're not in the fight. Usually it's one of those two when I have to ask this question, so I don't get to ask this question. I'm gonna ask you on the 4 that we just broke down: Danny Sabatello, Marcus Breno, Arlene Blanco, Sarah McMahon, Said Salma, Tim Johnson, and Liz Carmouche, Deanna Bennett. I need predictions from you, sir.
Well, for the main event, I think Liz Carmouche. I think she's got too much experience. I think she's going to find a way to get a victory here. I'm going to say maybe a submission in the late 3rd round or 4th round. I really hope Tim Johnson wins because he's the guy I see that can push the pace and actually implement his striking. I'm just afraid that Salma's going to try to turn it into a wrestling style match where he just pins Johnson up and we have to suffer for 15 minutes because I don't want to be that rude to Salma, but those have been his last 2 fights and they have been rough to watch. So hopefully he has something lit under his fire to showcase his striking, which he definitely has. I think McMahon can grind away a decision or come away with a submission early in the fight. I think if she's going to get a finish, I think it's going to be rounds 1 or 2, or she'll get a decision victory. I still see Sabatello finding a way to use that wrestling. I don't think he'll have to adjust. We all want him to adjust, but I think he doesn't need to adjust here against Marcus Breno. I don't know if Breno can stop the takedowns. Sure, he's 15-2 and had a great performance in his debut against Josh Hill. He's had some good fights in the LFA, but some of these guys where he's fought before coming up didn't have maybe the best of records or things of that nature. So I think Sabatello is going to come away with a win. But yeah, this is a good card, and just want to definitely say shout out to Bellator for picking up Kenny Cross, because that guy was given such a raw deal by the UFC multiple times that I honestly thought it was going to push him to the brink of retirement. Bellator, thank God we have other opportunities and other major promotions for these guys to compete in. Kenny Cross has deserved an opportunity like this for a long time, and I'm happy he's getting to not only make his debut with Bellator, but what a better venue to do it than Hawaii. Come on.
I know, right? That's what Deanna Bennett said too when she was asked about, oh, you're getting a title shot and it's in Hawaii. She's like, oh no, don't send me to Hawaii. I'm gonna, for the sake of not getting ran through the mud, I'm gonna stay neutral on the main event. I agree with you. I'd like to see Tim Johnson get it done. I don't think it's you being harsh on Said Salma at all. I think part of this podcast and being in this sport, we're in a weird sport, right? And I grew up in sports broadcasting and journalism, and I covered the NFL, the NBA, MLB, all of that. And you were only made into something if you knew how to criticize people. But here in this sport, we talk about professional athletes who fight each other in a cage, but will rip your head off if you say anything negative about them, right? You can't say it, but you should be able to. And it's not that Said Salma was a bad fighter. We just don't want to see 15 minutes of holding on and waist holding and wrestling and pressing up against the cage. We want to see action. Yeah, that's it. Nobody wants to see LeBron James dribble the basketball for 23 seconds and then just throw it into the air and see what happens. We just don't want to see that. With you, I'm also with you, I should say. I do like Sarah McMahon. I can see her getting it done TKO late 1st, early 2nd, and Danny Sabatello, man, start the weekend off right for me. He's kind of not the table setter for this card because there's Kenny Cross, Michael Lombardo, Tyrell Fortune. This card is fun. For people who like Bellator, this card is fun. But Danny Sabatello, because he brings the extra incentive of his mouthpiece, and I'm not talking about the thing that covers his teeth, I'm talking about his personality. He could really get the fireworks going in Hawaii with a great performance. So that is Bellator 294. And I don't think they're doing it this way, but I feel like Bellator 295 is definitely getting more of the hype. Obviously, there's a Grand Prix and belt on the line. Winner, to go on and have, as Patchy Mix said, super fights. There's so much at stake for the winner of this tournament, and we'll break it down now. Let's kind of go through the card. You've got Rafion Stotts and Patchy Mix for the Grand Prix Bantamweight Championship. You've got Alimale McFarlane and Kanano Watanabe. Aaron Pico returns. Ray Borg is fighting Koji Horiguchi. Yancy Medeiros, Kai Kamaka. I could go on and on. I want to start with someone who has been on this show multiple times, but someone who is early on in the night but could really shake things up. And that's in the heavyweight division. That's Davion Franklin taking on Kasim Aris. And Davion Franklin is a guy where we saw some crazy shit in his last fight. He tried to WWE powerbomb someone. He just emptied out the gas tank. But yet, it's a guy that Bellator is still very high on. A guy that looks like, he looks like a WWE wrestler, but he has all the makings, and he's at Jackson Wink. He has all of the tools and skill set to be a problem in the heavyweight division. No disrespect to his opponent, but why is not rushing him back into the top competition probably a good thing for Davion and Bellator?
Well, his opponent here in Kasim Aris, this is his debut here in Bellator. And I think sometimes for a fighter like Davion, this is a hot prospect. You don't want to rush him, right back up the card, especially after suffering his first pro loss back at Bellator 283 last July to Marcelo Hagholm, where, Franklin looked great. It's just he got pushed to a point that he'd only been pushed for 2 times in his career and kind of broke. The cardio was an issue for him. But I'm still high on Davion Franklin. This is a guy that, you talk about, looks like a WWE wrestler, could have been a WWE wrestler, got even recruited by WWE to go down to the Performance Center there and work, but he chose the route of MMA. And I'm thankful he chose the route of MMA because he's, an exciting prospect as a heavyweight, very agile, has good power. And, as you said, training at Jackson Wink with now a guy who's, taken the heavyweight division by storm after all these years in John Jones, that's got to be a huge boost to have in your camp. And I'm excited to see how he comes back because it's always going to be telling where I think his career is going to go after suffering that first loss. He was really on the gravy train, going in. He was 5-0. Now he's 5-1. And I think we're all excited to see what he can do. And I know when I spoke with him last year, he was calling for those fights with Steve Mowry. And hopefully maybe, a win here, you can make that Steve Mowry fight happen because that's a fight a lot of people want to see for 2 good prospects in the Bellator heavyweight division.
And what's crazy, you wonder, or you have to wonder, that he was previously booked against Daniel James. Obviously, James has an opponent. I'd like to see that fight.
I would too. If he gets a win and Daniel James gets a win in Chicago at Bellator 297, maybe you make that a fight down the line, though I know James is really pushing for that heavyweight title shot. And, if he gets a win, especially in Chicago, that place is going to go loud.
Yeah.
He's going to call for it. Maybe try to put the pressure on Scott Coker. Who knows? But there are options still for Davion Franklin, though he cannot look past his opponent here in Kasim Aris, the German fighter who's spent most of his time fighting for this EMC promotion out in Europe. And, he's beat some good guys, most of them, a couple submissions, a couple ground and pound finishes. But I think Franklin's going to be just a bit too much. But then again, there's also the real unknown as Kasim's fighting for the first time in North America. How's that going to affect him, the travel or anything of that nature? So it's an interesting fight, but I think Franklin will find a way to win. And I think for Bellator's sake, that's someone they need to have win to keep, get some excitement going in the heavyweight division. As we talked about before, there's not much excitement going on. There's some guys and pieces here, but Davion Franklin, if he wins, and especially by knockout, that would be huge for him and the heavyweight division.
I wasn't thinking this way until you mentioned it, but if Davion can go and let's say get a big knockout, give me Davion and Steve Mowry next. Just give it to me. Just give it to me. Like I'm not asking again. Just give me that fight. I would love to see that fight. For sake of time, because you've been so gracious, and I suck, and I don't want to keep you too long. I'm going to mention some names without breaking down their fight. Listen, Bellator 295 filled with Hawaiian talent: Keani Diggs, Smoke Inaba, Kai Kamaka, and then we have a guy that I love watching, Mads Burnell, Yancy Medeiros. I'm going to have us start with the main card, and that's Ray Borg and Kyoji Horiguchi. Ray Borg finally in Bellator. He had fought on the regional scene. He talked about that a little bit, and he said, I just didn't want to be a guy who just fought everywhere. I want to fight the best of the best, and this is pretty damn good. So what do you make of this opening main card matchup?
Man, I mean, good for Ray Borg to get to Bellator, and he's fought some good guys since leaving the UFC. 3-0 outside of the UFC with wins over Jesse Arnett, Cody Gibson, and Ricky Bandejas, a former Bellator bantamweight in his own right. But my God, what a tough test for you to come into Bellator
Right.
at flyweight against, the former champion in bantamweight, and like this is such a tough test. I think Borg's going to have to just really come out, try to push the pace early against Horiguchi. But the Horiguchi we saw back on New Year's Eve, I mean, that's just a different animal that I don't think a lot of people can find a way through. It should be an exciting fight. I'm happy that Borg is in this in Bellator, but just such a tough test. It's like basically your first day of school, and they're like, "Welcome to advanced calculus."
Yeah, yeah, right. It should be a great fight. It's a great opening main card fight. And then we have Aaron Pico returning after the shoulder injury. I was able to ask Aaron about that. Yesterday I said, people aren't dumb. If things, if you didn't get injured, who knows how things would have gone. And he said, listen, I don't consider that a loss or whatever. Everyone knows I would have won that fight. And for me, I'm still on a 6-fight win streak. And that confidence is great. That confidence is 100% great. However, he's got a game opponent in James Gonzalez, but he being Aaron Pico, can send a huge message with a impressive victory this weekend.
Yeah, I've been following James Gonzalez's from his time on the regional scene out in the northeast of the United States. I remember the first fight I saw him in, where he had unfortunately Pat Sabatini had a nasty arm injury in that fight, but he's been doing his thing on the regional scene with Ring of Combat, CFFC, and then now pit stops in Bellator, PFL, and then back here to Bellator, and hopefully he is a mainstay. But for Pico, it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts after the shoulder injury, having the confidence to really, try to get the fight to the ground, whatever it may be. But the Pico that we've seen as of late, other than the shoulder injury, was a guy that had really figured out kind of MMA before, the hype was in on him. He's just kind of a wild man trying to have the most exciting fight ever. Now he's just really figured out how to be a mixed martial artist. And that is a dangerous scenario for anyone in this Bellator featherweight division. I think Pico will find a way to win this fight, but I do expect James Gonzalez to take advantage of this opportunity and make it a very interesting fight.
It should be exactly that, a very interesting fight, as should the co-main event. I would be lying if I didn't say, if this does not go Ilima-Lei Macfarlane's way, we could see her hang up the gloves. When you're already talking about it, I understand maybe it's to motivate you and do whatever. It's definitely not Clay Guida style that we saw in Kansas City, but what better way to go out if things don't go your way than in your hometown? Kana Watanabe is not a lay-down opponent. She is a hell of a fighter, and this fight at 125 pounds is an absolute barn burner. Should be on paper. What do you make of this co-main event?
Well, obviously, you can't go to Bellator, Hawaii being Bellator without having Ilima-Lei Macfarlane on the card. Her entrance is going to be amazing. That's usually one of the highlights of these Bellator cards when she comes out, with the traditional tribal dance. She's always going to be supporting some cause. She definitely did last time for the natives on the island. I think she obviously knows she has to win, but she definitely felt the pressure her last time out in Hawaii, where she really got upset by Justine Kitch. I know she's bounced back since then with the decision win over Bruna Ellen, but Watanabe, as you were talking about, this is a big get to bring in from Japan in Watanabe. The one loss is to Liz Carmouche, who is the champion in this division, so there's nothing really anything to sneeze about in there. She's had some good performances, couple finishes, including most recently a triangle choke finish over Denise Keyholtz. And honestly, I think Watanabe can find a way to win this fight. And if Ilima-Lei ends up, losing, that's going to be an emotional moment with her potentially retiring in Hawaii. But if she wins, you definitely got to give her the winner of the women's flyweight title fight from Friday.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Sorry, cut out on my end. But no, I agree. The winner, this is the number one contender fight. So for Ilima-Lei, I want to see. It just feels weird, right? Because you're talking about maybe 2 fights and then retiring. You're talking about getting the belt and then retiring. But and you mentioned the fight against Justine Kish. I just don't like, and I'll bounce this back to you. What do you make when a fighter is talking about retirement, before a fight? Because it's such a high stakes fight. Like I said, Kanal Watanabe is not someone you just look past. But when you're talking about retirement, I understand you've given your entire life to this sport, but you're 12-2, and she obviously can do so many other things in her life and her career. Good mindset or bad mindset?
I don't think it's the best mindset to have where you're already thinking about calling it a career and you got to, game plan for potentially just going a full 15 minutes of all action, having to take some shots to give a shot or anything like that. I don't think it's the best mindset, but, if she's thinking about it in the sense of whatever happens, and I get a chance to say goodbye in Hawaii, which is, for her, probably she thought she'd never get an opportunity like that. I don't think she's got to have something look past her and looking past her opponent, but I'm still not the biggest fan of the mindset, but still we'll see what happens. Like if she goes out there and flattens Watanabe in like 30 seconds, like Liz Carmouche, then there's definitely no need to have that retirement talk. She's still got some gas left in the tank.
Yeah, I would like to see the re-energized version of Ilima-Lei Macfarlane, but like I said, and like you said, Watanabe, this could be a very tough fight. Could be the best fight of the weekend, but hard to say that when in the main event you got Rafion Stotts, Patchy Mix. The Grand Prix will be over. The champion will be decided. Man, Jason, you've been breaking this down. I'm even happier after talking to you so far for to ask you to have you come on the show, because we've been talking about it for a while and you're just breaking it down in a way a true professional like yourself could. The stage is set for you, man. I'm going to set the table for you. Patchy Mix, Rafion Stotts, best fight maybe so far in Bellator's calendar year.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge one for the promotion because they're going to, I guess, crown once again the interim Bellator bantamweight champion. But you can come to the conclusion of a Grand Prix that I'm happy Bellator got going. Hopefully this division gets another Grand Prix in the years to come. And as well, it's 2 Bellator homegrown faces. And I think that's a big thing for the promotion in building up their own stars and their own name brand opponents. Stotts has been the interim champion since the beginning of this Grand Prix, had the impressive head kick KO over Juan Archuleta, and then was able to get the split decision victory over Danny Sabatello. But I honestly think that as good as Stotts is, and I think Stotts is great having gold around his waist and being someone in front of the camera, he brings such energy, such a great personality for not just the division, but the promotion. I think Patchy Mix is just really too good, too tough for Rafion Stotts right now. Now, granted, Stotts has proven me wrong countless times if I've picked against him, but I think Mix, he's going to have a little bit of the size advantage. I think Mix has fought some of the better opponents getting into the Grand Prix. Like when I spoke with him about Horiguchi, he wasn't, super wowed by Horiguchi in his background, and he came away with a unanimous decision. He got a guillotine choke over Magomed Magomedov, and now I think he's just going to come through and pick up this tournament. He's going to be the interim champion, and it's going to be a big win, not for just Patchy Mix, but for mixed martial arts in Western New York. I know he's a guy from Buffalo, and, Buffalo, they need some champions in their own right. So Patchy Mix can set the tone for the Bills going into this NFL season. But Patchy Mix, I think, if he even does win, like what a bantamweight you have. He would be 18-1. And just once again, the argument of, are the Bellator champions or upper tier fighters as good as the UFC? And I think you would have to make that statement. Yes, especially at 135 pounds.
If not better.
Yeah.
Depending on the fighter as well. Jason, I think we talked ad nauseum about Bellator's heavy hitting weekend. Let's move over to a UFC fight night, which should be a hell of a fight night. Literally this is one of those cards where the casuals go, I don't know most of those guys. And they sleep on what this card could be. I mean, Brady Heisen kicking it off. You've got Francis Fire Marshall. Another fight I'm really excited about, Muhammad Usman against Junior Tafa. Norma Dumont's fighting. I mean, this fight card, excuse me, has so many fun names on it. Just looking at this card on paper, being as knowledgeable about this sport as you are, how excited are you for this UFC card?
I'm excited for the card in the sense of the fight should be good. I'm not excited it's back at the Apex. And I know the next two shows with this one and the following weekend are back at the Apex, but it's such a bummer, especially with after how great the UFC's been in front of, fresh fans, whether it was Kansas City, Miami a few weeks ago. Sucks it's back at the Apex. It's just going to feel very bland, but there's some exciting fights on this card. As you mentioned, very important fight in the main event at the heavyweight division with Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blades, Bobby Green, Jared Gordon. That should be absolutely dynamite, and one that's just looking at the card, I've definitely got circled. It's Jeremiah Wells and Matt Semmelsberger. That should be just a heavy, hard-hitting fight at 170 pounds.
Yeah, main card opener. Let's start the main event, though, because as we talked about in Bellator, we're going to talk about in the UFC. We saw what John Jones did to Ciryl Gane earlier this year, winning the heavyweight title after years of the tease. It finally paid off, right? And then we have him and Stipe Miocic going back and forth, and then Dana White saying that fight's going to get made, and we all know how both. Listen, this is a knock on both of them. We know how both Stipe and John Jones are when it comes to getting the fights finalized, right? We've seen it time and time again. But make no mistake, after that, after Stipe and after John meet, 100% in my opinion, the winner of this main event has to be the next challenger for the title. Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, there are some other names, but really, Blades, if he wins, it's really going to be hard to deny him a title opportunity. But, the UFC's just found their ways to do that. However, Sergey Pavlovich, when you look what he's done, just look at his last two fights. They haven't even lasted a minute. 55-second knockout against Derek Lewis and a 54-second knockout against Tai Tuivasa. Two big names in that heavyweight division, guys, the UFC has been building up. I think Pavlovich, he's just going to find a way. The one thing about Curtis Blades is we know he's got the wrestling credentials. We know he's, one of the top heavyweights, but he still has that susceptible chin. We've seen it countless times against Francis Ngannou. Granted, he's got that guy hits like a truck. We saw it against Derek Lewis in a fight. Lewis was losing. He just hit Blades in the right spot. I think Pavlovich can do it. And Pavlovich is a little bit more well-rounded when it comes to the grappling side of things than Ngannou and Derek Lewis were and are. So I honestly think Pavlovich wins, and we get ourselves another Russian heavyweight potentially really in the mix to fight for a heavyweight title down the line. Yeah,
I don't obviously think that title fight may come this year, because I think obviously Stipe and John will fight late in the year, and then I don't know. When you look at the rankings, I think Ciryl Gane, he had it. Okay, we saw what John did to him. I don't know that he would do any better against Stipe. And then you have obviously Stipe, and then it's just Sergey and Curtis at 3 and 4 in the UFC rankings. So for me, that's why I call it a title eliminator. Curtis Blades is on a 3-fight win streak. And Jason, this was the fight I was most looking forward to having a conversation with you about, because you are right. Curtis has lost to two of the heaviest hand hitters of all time, Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou. And Francis does not exist anymore and in the UFC. And Derek Lewis has had his ups and downs. But during this time, Blades has beat Rosenstrike, Chris Daukaus, who he knocked out, and then Tom Aspinall with the unfortunate knee injury. I think that fight was going to be fireworks. You saw a lot of respect between the two afterwards, which how could you not? But, Curtis has always been very mindful of the room, right? He's got very good situational awareness from the times I've talked to him. He knows that the shiny toy that gets Dana White's attention is going to be the one, and the fans' attention is going to be the one that gets the rewards. And it's something that irritates the shit out of me, because if it wasn't heavyweight, maybe if it was just any other weight, let's say if it was a flyweight, that just had this crazy resume of wrestling. And all he did was wrestle. Because, and I'm not comparing the two, but we saw it at lightweight. We saw a guy who excelled at wrestling and used it to set up TKOs and ground and pounds and submissions. And I am talking about, retired former undefeated champion Khabib Nurmagomedov. We see it at these lower weights. So I'm just curious, why is there such a negative connotation around Curtis Blaydes? Because in my opinion, and this is why I wanted to have this talk with you, in my opinion, it shouldn't matter the weight or how the victory is done. I understand you have to sell tickets, but if the guy is beating every single person you send his way, except two, how can you continue to deny him and look past it?
It's one of those things just about why MMA is kind of a dumb sport. Like, yes, obviously he should be rewarded, but is he doing it in an exciting, flashy way that, because if he's going to get a title shot, it's going to be on pay-per-view. Is Curtis Blaydes a name that is going to generate enough interest in people to purchase a pay-per-view or get an ESPN Plus subscription to want to watch him fight for a title? And I think as good as Curtis Blaydes is, he's got a great resume. He's got some great names on his resume of guys he's beat. He trains at a great gym. He just is missing just that exciting personality factor, just that extra bit. And that's really what this is about as well. Like, you can be a great fighter, but if you're, have the personality of a coat hanger, no one's going to want to watch you or pay to see you fight. And that's really deep down what the UFC, they're all into. They are into making money. Are they going to make money off Curtis Blaydes? And right now, I don't think they're going to make much money off Curtis Blaydes in people purchasing pay-per-views or wanting to watch him fight. So he's going to have to come out here. If he gets a knockout and he knocks out someone like Pavlovich, pretty viciously, he's definitely getting himself back in the conversation in a serious manner. And I think that's what he's going to have to do. And if he knows that that's the game, then he's got to find a way to execute it or find that opening and put a stellar performance on against Pavlovich that really gets Dana to change his mind. As Dana, you can say what you want about him. He may not, may have a lot of flaws, but if you have a performance that's very impressive, he's open to changing his mind for the benefit of said fighter and for the business of the promotion.
So you're obviously very knowledgeable about the sport and the history of the sport. So I will bring up one fight that I think, I'm not saying it could happen. I'm saying it would probably need to happen for Curtis to cement his title fight opportunity. And that is when Curtis defeated Alistair Overeem and sliced him open with elbows in such a way. And listen, I get what you're saying. And yes, you have to make money. You have to sell tickets. You have to sell ESPN Plus. You have to sell pay-per-views, all of that. But if Curtis does, let me just say this. If Curtis gets the victory, that's definitely not just going to be enough, right? There has to be something. Now, if he gets a TKO victory and he beats up Pavlovich, or if it's a war, or if he scores a crazy knockout, now we're talking. But even if he were to just get a grinded out decision victory, call me crazy, but I would want to see that wrestling against John Jones's grappling. Now it's obviously different coming from me or coming from you. We're not casuals in this sport, but to me, you've already got your A side, like my injured ass hand here. You've already got your A side, right? How many times have we seen this though? How many times have we seen an A side with a relatively, okay, whatever, at least I know this guy. Let John sell the shit or Stipe sell the shit out of the pay-per-view. I think for Curtis Blaydes' hopes, it should be John Jones for two reasons. John will sell the pay-per-view. And two, if I'm Curtis, I'd almost rather beat John than Stipe. I can't speak for Curtis, but go ahead.
Well, if I'm Curtis Blaydes, obviously I got to take care of business here on Saturday at the Apex against Sergey Pavlovich. And I know I probably have to have a very impressive performance. Granted, we know probably he wouldn't get a title shot this year. And the other thing is, Tom Aspinall's coming back. You probably maybe rematch that fight. Or if Aspinall, whoever he may fight, if it's not Curtis Blaydes, and gets a win. And, Aspinall's got the track record with a lot more exciting finishes. I could see them maybe giving Aspinall a title shot, especially in England against John Jones. And the other thing is, Francis Ngannou could come back to the UFC. We know he's going to go try this boxing thing, but I just feel like the buzz around Francis Ngannou isn't as big as what we thought it would be, or at least especially what he thought it would be leaving the UFC. I think Francis may be one of those fighters that needs the UFC name as well with him. I commend him for trying to go out on his own. We'll see how this boxing endeavor does do, whoever he ends up fighting. But it just seems like we haven't heard much about Francis since he stepped away from the UFC in January. So I could see him coming back. And that's the fight John Jones and Francis really have wanted. And the UFC would make that would sell, a couple million pay-per-views. So that's just the thing, is Curtis is just one of those guys. He's really good, but there's some other names that could jump him in that spot. So Curtis has to find a way to have really the performance of his career, I would think, come Saturday night.
I think that's beautifully said by you, Jason. Tip of the cap on that to you. I think we're all in agreement. If Sergey Pavlovich wins in continuously impressive fashion as he has, it's going to be hard to deny him a title fight next.
Yeah, I think especially if, the track record you're on, you're getting, wins over big names in under a minute. I don't think, Dana loves that. Dana loves those guys that you can try to mark as the baddest man on the planet. You definitely will probably hear that. If he beats Curtis Blades in, let's say, 57 seconds this time, you'll hear, oh, Sergey Pavlovich, he could be the baddest man on the planet right now, or something of that nature. But and as well, he would be 18-1. It'd be hard to deny Pavlovich there the title fight. Sure, he doesn't speak English. He's a Russian guy, but that's just, good marketing as well. Just like this dominant Russian versus, they would probably market the All-American boy John Jones in that sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that would be a lot of fun, right? John or Stipe against Russia, right? Like, how could you deny that? Very quickly on that fight, we know what both men are capable of, right? We know Curtis is going to look to wrestle, likely ground and pound. You mentioned it won't be an easy, task for him, on the ground. But I think we obviously know Sergey upper hand in striking and Curtis on the ground. How do you really see this fight playing out?
I do see Pavlovich finding a way to hit that sweet spot on Curtis Blades and get a TKO KO, whether it be in the first or second round, because Curtis is going to try to, wrestle, but the background of Pavlovich is Greco-Roman wrestling. And that's just, that you don't take those guys down with ease that Curtis has had some success with recently in his career. So I just see Pavlovich winning this fight by KO TKO.
Well, Jason, as much as I respect all of your opinions so far on that one, I hope you're wrong, because I listen. It's not just because I talk to Curtis regularly on the show, and this is a fight he called for, and you're gonna, if you think this is fired up, Mike, Jason, wait till we get to the Bobby Green Jared Gordon fight, because I got plenty of shit to say about that. But you're talking about a guy 17-3. He's going up against 17-1 in Pavlovich, right? And he has lost to, again, two of the heaviest hitters. So if Francis Ngannou does not exist, and I understand we're playing this if game, right? But literally think about that. If he doesn't exist, then the only loss he would have is to Derek Lewis in a fight that he was winning. And so for me, it's not like he's lost to bums along the way or guys at the beginning of his professional career. He has been dominant throughout 95% of his professional career. And he called for this fight. And Curtis 100% could have started a stir. He could have ran his mouth. And some people might have liked that. But he said, I want the winner of Pavlovich and Tuivasa, and I'm going to wait for that. And we know how dangerous that is. That's why Francis Ngannou left, because he wanted to play this non-negotiable game with Dana White in the UFC. Curtis is like, I get the business. I'm going to speak my mind, but I'm not going to be a rollover either. All right. And to me, more than anything, more than a title fight opportunity might be next, more than getting a big win over Pavlovich, I think Curtis Blades could use Saturday night to cement his brand and who the hell he is. Like, Again, Roy Jones, y'all must have forgot. Like, it's just because there's been so much hang up in the heavyweight division. And Sergey Pavlovich is the brand new Ferrari on the parking lot that everyone wants to drive and see how fast it can get to the top. That's what everyone wants. And I'm not taking anything away from Pavlovich. He is a monster. But sometimes the sport of MMA is unfair and the ridicule behind it is bullshit. And I'm not saying, oh, poor Curtis Blades. He has to go get the job done. But the fact is, even as you said, Jason, if he gets the job done, he may not get a title fight, which is crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. I'm going to digress because I've got one more rant in me before we end today. But in the co-main event, we got Brad Tavares, Bruno Silva. I mean, this is a fan's favorite co-main event.
Yeah, I mean, Bruno Silva, though, coming off 2 losses in a row, one by decision to, Alex Pereira, which there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, he went the distance with Pereira in Pereira's second UFC fight. And then Gerald Meerschaert, where he was submitted in the 3rd round, one of those fights where Meerschaert just keeps coming on stronger as the fight goes on. But, has, 3-2 record in the UFC with all 3 wins coming by finish against, Brad Tavares. This is a true veteran of the sport. He's fought, anyone and everyone basically in this division at this weight class. Really was the stepping stone for Israel Adesanya to get into that upper tier of the middleweight division before it's now Izzy's world at 185. And his last loss was to Driscoll du Plessis. There's nothing wrong with that. Back in July, he was supposed to fight Gregory Rodriguez back in January. That didn't happen. So I'm excited to see it. He's getting a tough Brazilian. This should be a good stand-up style Rock'em Sock'em Robot fight that I see going the distance and maybe split decision Silva coming through. But this one, I think, deserves to be the co-main event for what we have here in this fight night card.
So I would only disagree with you because the next fight is also on this
there's
card.
There's a point there.
It's also on this card. And I'm going to let you handle it first because, and I'm sorry if my rants are annoying you, but you're one of the very few I get to rant with because, obviously people on the media side of this sport, I like to rant with because either you can completely disagree and not offend me or you can agree and I like you even more. But Bobby Green, Jared Gordon, I'll just let you start.
Well, what an exciting fight this is going to be, especially with Bobby Green coming out at the media day yesterday with $60,000 in cash for, quote, motivation. Bobby Green's just been one of the most exciting fighters. I mean, if you've never seen a Bobby Green fight, make sure you sit down and find a way to watch this fight because he is all action. Sure, his record may not blow people away, especially his record in the UFC where he's 10-9-1. And he's coming off really the first time in the history of his UFC career that he's been finished by Drew Dober. It was a big win for Drew Dober, but this guy fought Islam Makhachev on super last minute. And he's just super exciting. He's just going to get right in your face. He's going to talk some trash in the fight. He's going to probably say some motivational stuff if he gets on the microphone after the fight. He's just all action. And then there's Jared Gordon, who was robbed of his big breakthrough fight he was robbed against Paddy Pimblett back at UFC 282 in December. Should have beat Paddy Pimblett. Scorecards did not go his way, but that's why you don't leave it to the judges. So at least he gets this opportunity here against Bobby Green in a fight that both men should just really push each other, land some big shots. And I see this one going by a decision. I don't know who. I think I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the festivities, as Robin Black would say. This should be an excellent fight and one that I think could be fight of the night once we're done this fight night card.
Honestly, could be the fight of the weekend outside of the Bellator main event at Bellator 295. I will say, and big shout out to Robin Black. Robin Black, one of the best guys in the sport, was a huge motivator for me getting into this business. But call me crazy if you haven't already in your head. But when I look at this fight, I think I'm trying to make sure I don't mess up what I exactly want to say here. I think first and foremost, I think Jared Flash Gordon's stock is much higher than Paddy Pimblett's right now. And I'm not, taking away, obviously Paddy got hurt, the ankle surgery. You can't, kind of hold that against him. However, with Jared Gordon facing a Bobby Green type of fighter. You just talked about the energy and impact that he brings and all of that. I think, and I've never been in the matchmaking room, I probably never will be, but if I'm the UFC, this was the perfect fight for us to give to Jared Gordon, because we could continuously talk about the Paddy Pimblett robbery and screw over and all of that. Well, as you just said, don't leave it to the judges. All right. So your next fight, we're going to, even though you said you're just going to sit back and it may go to a decision, we're going to give you a guy who's going to bring the fight to you and will likely not allow it to have to go to the judges. I think this is beautiful matchmaking by the UFC. I think Jared's stock is higher than Paddy Pimblett's right now, and I think this could be one of the best fights of the weekend.
I think Jared's stock's definitely higher because of him not getting the decision. It's one of those rare fights in combat sports where you gain more in a loss than maybe he would in a win. He should have won that fight for sure, but his stock is really high. And plus, you know, we're going to see what Bobby Green's going to be like with coming off really his first TKO loss in the UFC in quite some time, I should say. He did get finished, of course, by Dustin Poirier back in 2016 at UFC 199, but in quite some time. So we'll see. I mean, Bobby Green's older, but these are two vets of the sport. You know, Bobby Green with a little bit more experience than Jared Gordon. These guys got some great backstories as people. I think this should be such a compelling fight. I don't know if there'll be a video package on it or anything like that. I wish there was, just because I said of their backstories. But this should be just a great fight and really entertaining fight, and one that showcases the lightweight division, which still is one of the top divisions in the sport. I personally feel like bantamweight has surpassed it, but these are guys that are just on the outside looking in of being inside the rankings that want to put on a big performance. And where Jared Gordon, as we were just talking about, his stock is high. He needs to beat Bobby Green to get within those rankings and keep getting those bigger fights.
And I'll say this. I'll go as far as to say this. I don't want the rematch. I've had it. I'm done. I'm over with. If Jared goes out and beats Bobby Green, there's no reason for him to look back and want to face. I mean, let Paddy get a win first now. You know, I just beat somebody and listen, this is not disrespect to Paddy Pimblett, but I just beat somebody who's a veteran of the sport who has fought the who's who at lightweight. So I don't need you right now, Paddy. Get another win. I'm gonna look forward. I'm not gonna look back. So I think Jared Gordon continues to have his stock raised, obviously, if he wins against Bobby Green. Beautiful point, though. And as somebody who is in this sport, and this will be the first and only in-depth question I have for you, if you can go inside, you know, the life of a fighter. You talk about Jared Gordon and Bobby Green, and you talk about their backstories. And to me, that is something that always drew me into this sport and why I love this sport. And you take 30 minutes, you can find Jared Gordon, not only his story, but you can have him tell it, you know, through multiple interviews, the big one being Ariel Helwani a few years ago. And it's a very disturbing story. You can hear that, you know, similarly, not a great story for Bobby Green's past, but both of them are two of the most exciting fighters where guys like me and you cannot effing wait for this fight to happen. And to me, it not only talks about them as martial artists, it talks about them as men. Jason, as somebody who's been around so many fighters in your life and your career, why is going through hell and back outside of the cage almost a good thing for these fighters, because they just put it all out on the line for fans, media, all of us to watch?
Well, I mean, especially in this sport where you're going to get pushed to brinks that, you know, you never will get pushed in any other sport, you know, not to disrespect any other sport, but, you know, you're pushed to, you know, getting beaten down or anything like that. You know, life has beaten down Bobby Green and Jared Gordon to a point. And so overcoming a life adversity that both these men have done, like a fight or a situation in a fight, that's nothing compared to what they've gone through in their personal lives to overcome that and become the better people, the better, as you said, martial artists that they are. So any, you know, adversity they face inside the UFC octagon for 15 minutes, you know, that's nothing for them. They're going to find ways to, you know, they've improved themselves as people. They've gone from the dark side to seeing the light. And I think that's why this sport is amazing. It gives them an outlet to, you know, channel some frustrations and really an outlet to keep them from going back to, you know, bad pasts or bad situations.
Yeah, I think Jared said it best after the Patty fight. He's like, everything I've been through, I'm not going to let a judge's scorecard,
Yeah.
mess me up. But Jason, because we have one more event to talk about, I'm going to let you put a bow on it. Who are some fighters you're looking forward to the most on this weekend's UFC Fight Night card?
Well, like I said, I think Jeremiah Wells and Matt Semmelsberger, that's a fight that I think could steal and sneak up and potentially be a fight of the night and maybe pass this Bobby Green, Jared Gordon fight when the night has come to an end. Muhammad Usman, let's see what he can do here in the UFC heavyweight division since winning the Ultimate Fighter in impressive fashion against Zach Pauga, against the always tough-handed Junior Tafa, who is undefeated and making his UFC debut after a solid run through, Europe and Japan. So I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table here inside the octagon. As you said, Brady Highstand versus Batgrel Dana, that should be a really good fight as well to kick things off. So there are some fun fights on this card. And of course, as well, Ricky Glenn, Christios Yagos, that should be fun as well. There's some good fights on this card. It's just with all the action that's going on Saturday that some of them may just get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, it's going to be a great night of fights. And definitely this UFC card's got me fired up. So a lot of fun stuff. Jason, not much to really break down here. Just want to talk about it because it might be the most watched fight and talked about fight heading into this weekend. That's the boxing fight against Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. I know there's word that it's already one of the top 10 boxing gates of all time, which is kind of crazy to think about. But just how big is this fight in terms of the boxing world?
It's huge because it's two of the best fighters in their weight class at 136 pounds that are actually fighting each other. There's not this talk of, I will fight you, and then, contracts are going to get in the way of it. It's a fight that boxing needs. To me, it's the most exciting fight that can be made this year. And I know the heavyweight division's got a lot of interest going on, but this to me is the real deal fight. It's two undefeated fighters, not even in their prime, that are going to step up. It really, I know Bernard Hopkins, when he was talking in the press conferences before, was saying this feels like a fight from the 80s. That's exactly what it feels like when boxing was just this special sport. And it's a fight that boxing needs because, to me, as much as there's the Jake Paul thing to create some interest for some young viewers to the sport of boxing, boxing's kind of become kind of comical in how much, people from the outside just kind of laughing at. These are two of the elite, two thoroughbreds that are going to step in there and they're going to put on, hopefully, a fantastic fight for the crowd in Las Vegas come Saturday night. I cannot wait for this fight. I mean, it's on Showtime pay-per-view. It's on DAZN pay-per-view. I'm happy no contracts, no boxing politics got in the way from it. They ironed it out. This fight is happening, and it should be the fight of the year in boxing, and it should be one of the biggest fights that hopefully opens the floodgates for more big super fights in these lower weight classes.
We've gone about 90 minutes in this podcast. We almost did it, Jason. We almost did a whole event weekend without mentioning Jake Paul. I'm not going to ask you about him, but we almost did it. Now, here's the thing. And maybe I'm crazy and you can tell me I am because I've said that 4 times now. I think Gervonta Davis could do bad things to Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan Garcia could outwork and possibly outclass Gervonta Davis. But when I say Gervonta Davis with one of those dangerous hooks, he could really hurt Ryan Garcia. And then you talk about the floodgates opening up. Who's going to fight Tank now? But here's my only problem, and it's only a 30-second rant. You said, and Bernard Hopkins said, it feels like a fight from the 80s. Why do we have to go all the way back in the boxing world to the 80s to get a fight feel of that nature? It's ridiculous. I am so sick. Dude, we just talked about a top contender in the UFC's heavyweight division possibly not getting a title shot if he picks up his 4th win in a row over a top 3 contender simply because he's not exciting enough. That would be the only reason. That doesn't exist in boxing. In boxing, it's exactly what you talked about. It is what we saw earlier with this fight. Rehydration clauses and contracts and TV rights and broadcast and everything in between. And it is so ridiculous that I'm excited, Jason. I am 100% excited. I can't wait for this fight. But what's next? That's the biggest thing. I'm going to ask you to call out for a winner. I think I've already made my pick very well known. But here's the thing. What's next? Because that's what I care about. Because it's boxing. In the UFC, I'll wait. I don't know what's going to happen with Leon Edwards in the welterweight division. I don't know. I know who I think it should be. I think it should be Bilal Muhammad. They're saying Colby Covington. That's fine. I'll wait and see. In boxing, what's next for the winner of Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis, Gervonta Davis? You can tell me who it is, but does that mean it's going to happen? Probably not.
Well, yeah, I mean, we almost didn't even get this fight because of some contract negotiation nonsense that always happens in boxing. And thank God it got ironed out, because if this fight didn't happen, it'd be criminal. I think I told one of my friends that this would be a crime that if this fight didn't happen, because of the politics of boxing, which is the biggest issue that boxing's had for centuries, and why boxing, I think, has taken a step back to MMA. And why this fight has that feel, because they actually got it done. I think people are like, oh my God, they actually got this done. Can't believe we're going to actually see these guys fight. I mean, there's still lots of potential names. I know maybe we get a Devin Haney coming out of it. I know he's got a fight coming up. So maybe whoever wins after the Haney fight fights the winner of this fight. But when you look at the breakdown of this fight, I do see Gervonta Davis winning this around the 8th to 10th round. I think he's going to find a way to get to that chin of Garcia. Garcia is going to have to use some great footwork. He's going to have to use the speed to get in, get out, and try to combine that speed with some power, get Davis off guard. Because I think Davis, he lives up to his nickname. He is a tank. He's short, but he can hit you hard and put you down. And the fight I keep going back to when I think of Ryan Garcia was his fight with Luke Campbell, where he got dropped early against Luke Campbell, came back and won that fight by a TKO in the 7th round. But I don't know if he gets dropped early or gets clipped early from a Gervonta Davis, if he can get back up or even get in the fight, because Davis is just a whole other animal.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here, Jason, and I do appreciate you making 90 minutes of your day for me today, man. I've loved it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Last one here. What does a win do for Tank Davis, the brand, and what does, because in my opinion, you've got Tyson Fury, you've got Canelo, and yes, you have all these other boxers, Spence, Crawford, all these other guys. But if he does, and what we're hyping this fight up to be and what the world is expecting of this fight, if Gervonta Davis puts Ryan Garcia on the canvas, it should, in theory, put him in a whole different universe when it comes to boxing superstars. Do you believe that will happen?
I think if Gervonta Davis wins and wins by a finish, a TKO, a KO, especially a KO, I think he becomes the face of boxing. Like, I think Tyson Fury in these negotiations with Usyk really hurt the brand of Tyson Fury. I don't think a lot of people are too happy with Tyson Fury. Canelo, I know he's got a fight coming up in a few weeks on Cinco de Mayo. He's still a big name in the sport and maybe the biggest pay-per-view seller, but I think Gervonta Davis can make a run at that if he gets a decisive finish like that. This is a guy that is just all action, doesn't say much to the media when he's at these press conferences, may show up an hour or two late, doesn't matter. He feels like he's got a superstar vibe, and he lets most of his talking done in the ring. And I think that's what makes it so exciting. And even the same thing can go for Garcia, because he could be like, he's with Golden Boy. He could be an Oscar De La Hoya 2.0. He's got those, looks to bring in, some of the female demographic in. He's still very young. This would be a huge win, especially if he gets a finish. I think both these guys can really elevate their platform, their brand, and really become one of the main faces, the top 5 faces, I would say, in boxing here in the year 2023.
Well, I think we agreed on a lot this weekend. I think we both know that there's going to be a hell of a weekend of fighting and combat sports ahead of us. I will let you get prepared for it and get ready for it. I know I'm excited. I wish today was Friday so we could be, but I need a day to promote this podcast, and I need a day to, share some of your great insight. I like you, before I let you go, to let everyone know where they can follow you and find your work.
You can follow me on Twitter at the letter J, my last name, which is Hagholm, Hagholm, and the number 1 at the end. That's where you can find me on Twitter. At Instagram, it's just at J Hagholm, and that's where you can find me there. I'll post some links as well to my YouTube channel, where I'll try to get some content up. It's been a little bit of a struggle for me as of late, but there will be some content hopefully coming up on that channel in recently, but I will share that as well through other social media platforms like my Twitter and Instagram.
I love it, man. Well, thank you. Hopefully you'll want to come back on. I had a blast talking to you. We won't always have a stacked weekend, so it won't always be 90 minutes, but man, hell of a time talking to you, and enjoy a weekend of combat. During this, I just found out that my Friday has changed, so now I am completely free to enjoy the festivities.
Yes, this should be a great weekend. It does suck that, that boxing pay-per-view with UFC and Bellator kind of going all head-to-head, triple threat match style. Not a fan of that, but there's going to be ways and windows to peek in. You're going to have to find a way to get some 3 screens going, everyone, if you want to see all the festivities. But it should be a great weekend, and this is one of those fun weekends where boxing blends in with MMA to the highest level.
Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mike. Hope to be back on.